Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my 2024 reading wrap up. I'm going to be going over month by month every single book that I read this year. There are going to be a couple of books that I did DNF, and then there will be a bunch of books that will be displayed on the screen when I'm talking about them that I read on the Kindle that I don't own, or that were like Kindle exclusive or whatever, and those I'll talk about everything as I'm coming across it. So yeah, I'm going to go through all, let's see, how many books did I read this year? 58. All 58. So we are going to go over all 58 books that I read in 2024. If you see me looking down, I do have my reading journal in front of me because I'm going to go month by month in order of what I read and then also give you what I rated the book. And we're going to do that month by month, January through December. So let's go ahead and jump in. First up for January, this was obviously the first month of the year, but also my first month getting back into reading. I didn't know how it was going to go, if I was going to stick with it. So started out pretty small. Excuse me. Started out pretty small. I only read 3 books this month, which for getting back into reading, I think that's great. So the first book that I read of the year was Almost There. This is a Twisted Tales book. I'm not sure how you pronounce where's the author? Right here. You can't even see it. Oh no. Okay, there it is. Farah. I have no idea how you say her last name, so I'm not even gonna try to pronounce it, but this is the first book I read this year. Is Twisted Tale of Tiana's story from Princess and the Frog. And you just kind of follow along on the adventure that Tiana and all her friends go on. The fun thing about the Twisted Tale books are it's very similar to the actual story of that character, except, like I said, it's a twisted tale, so it's a little bit twisted and not, how the actual story goes. It's basically following like the what if question that all of these books have. So what if Tiana made a deal that changed everything? So it's following along with like if Princess and the Frog had played out and she had fallen, or she had made this deal, this is what the story would have been. And I find that so fascinating, especially being a Disney fan. So I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4.5. Next we have It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I gave this book a 5. Next up we have, this is the last book for January, It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover, which is the book that comes after It Ends With Us, which I know is a little bit confusing based on the titles, but this book comes after It Ends With Us. I rated this one a 5 as well. Okay, on to February. In February, I read 5 books. First up, we have another Twisted Tales book. This is Mirror Mirror by Jen Kalonita. You can see it right there. Hope you can see that. Obviously this is Snow White themed. The question is, what if the evil queen poisoned the prince? This book is very much, I would say, an evil queen story. She's pictured on the front here. You learn basically like her history, like as she was growing up, that kind of made her into the evil queen. And it's just a whole different perspective of the Snow White story, hence it being a Twisted Tale story. So I gave this book a 3.5, really enjoyed it. Next up, I read all 3 books in the LA Candy series, so I'm just going to one book at a time. This first one is called LA Candy by Lauren Conrad. This first book I gave a 3.5. Then I went on to the second book, Sweet Little Lies. Also, these are all by Lauren Conrad. And the third book, I didn't say what I rated this one. This one I rated a 4. So a half a step up from the first one. Then this one is Sugar and Spice. This is the third and final book in the series. Then the last book that I read in February is The Way I Used to Be by Amber Smith. Rated it a 4. Okay, on to March. I read another 5 books in March. The first one being Flawless by Elsie Silver. This is the first book in the Chestnut Springs series. I rated this a 5. I loved it. Next, we have Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. I rated it a 4. Next, we have Twisted Love by Anna Huang. This is the first book in the Twisted series. I rated this a 5. Next up, we have Happy Place by Emily Henry. Rated this a 4. The last book that I read in March is Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh. This is the first book in the Boys of Toman series. That was the last book that I read in March, and I gave it a 4.5. Okay, on to April. I read another 5 books. That seems to be my like trend for the year, was reading 5 books every month. So the first one we have is The Bromance Book Club by Lyssa Kay Adams. I rated a 3.5. Next up we have Pretend You're Mine by Lucy Score. You'll see throughout the year how many Lucy Score books I've read. But I love Lucy Score. She is definitely, after this year reading, I would say she is like one of, if not my favorite author. I rated this a 5, of course, because, you know, I love Lucy Score. So 5 stars. Next up we have The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. I rated this a 3.75. Next up, we have another Lucy Score book. I have Forever Never. I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 3.75. The last book that I read in April is called In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle, I think is how you say her last name. Not really sure. I give this a 3.5. On to May. This is where it got a little bit rocky for me. So I read 1 physical book, 4 ebooks, which I'll get to in a minute, and then I had 1 DNF. So let's just go in the order here of how everything fell out to be. The first book that I read was the only physical book that I read, which was A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This is the first book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. 5 stars. Next up, we have my first ever ebook for the year and in my life. And at this point, I hadn't gotten my Kindle yet. So I read these on the Kindle app on my phone. This is the books that I'm talking about are the Improbable Meet Cute series. They are 5 little like mini books. They're like 100 pages or less. And they're not all connected to each other, but they're kind of along like the same theme. So the first book in this series is The Exception of the Rule, which is, I'll put the cover up right here, by Christina Lauren, and I gave it a 4. Next up, we have my DNF, which was The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. I wrote DNF, but I would say that this is probably closer to a soft DNF. So what I basically said that I didn't like was that I was just really bored. It was moving really slow. Nothing was captivating me. It was really slow burn. But I did say that I was not against picking this book back up in the future. So that's why I would say it's more of a soft DNF. I feel like at some point in the future, I might pick this back up again and give it another try. But at the time, it was just not working for me. Next up, we have the second book in the Improbable Meet Cute series, The Worst Wingman Ever. This is by Abby Jimenez. But that one I also gave a 4. Then we have Rosie and the Dreamboat. This one's by Sally Thorne. This one I gave a 4.5. Then the next one, I read all of these except for 1 in May. So the next one is Drop, Cover, and Hold On by Jasmine, I don't know how you say that, Guillory, I don't know. But I rated it a 3.5, and that was the last book that I read in May. Next up, we have June. The first book I read, actually first I forgot to say that I read 4 books in June. The first book was The Summer of Broken Rules by K.L. Walther. 5. Next up, oh, I skipped one. So this is the fifth and final book. I think I read them in order. I had to have read them in order. But of the Improbable Meet Cute series, With Any Luck. This one's by Ashley Poston. This one I rated a 3. Next up, we have The Summer I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han. I rated it a 2.5. Next up, we have another DNF. This was No Boy Summer by Amy Spalding. Again, I think that this was just a too young of adult book for me. Nothing was really happening. I kind of just didn't really connect. I don't even know how much of it I read. I didn't get very far into it, I don't think. Oh, wait, there was another book from this series. I thought there was only 5. Maybe there was 6. There must have been 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I guess there was 6. So the other book in the Improbable Meet Cute series is Royal Valentine. This one's by Saria. Oh, she said Soraya Wilson. This one I rated a 4.5. Next up, we have Beach Read by Emily Henry. I rated it a 4.5. And then the last book for June is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. This one I rated a 4.25. On to July. I only read 3 books in July. First up, we have People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This one I rated a 4.25. Next, we have Same Time Next Summer by Annabelle Monaghan. This one I rated a 3.5. And then the last book that I read in July is Breathe by Abby Glines. This is a reread for me. I read this book back in high school. This is the first book in the Seabreeze series. Next up, we have August. I read 4 books in August. The first book that I read was the second book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, Good Girl, Bad Blood. I rated this a 5, of course, so love, love, love. Next up, I have the second book in the Chestnut Springs series, Heartless by Elsie Silver. Again, another 5-star read for me. I'm loving the Chestnut Springs series. Next up, we have It's a Date Again by Geneva. Is that Geneva? Geneva Rose. Okay. I gave this book a 3.5. The last book that I read in August was When in Rome by Sarah Adams. I gave it a 4 stars. Okay, now into September. I read 5 books. First up, we have French Kissing in New York. I am not even going to try to say her name. So you can see it right there at the bottom. I gave it a 3.75, so pretty good. Next up, we have Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. This is the first book in the Knock 'Em Out series. Next up, we have Only Love Can Hurt Like This by Paige Toon. 3.25 on that one. Next up, we have The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This one, I rated a 4. Next up, we have, this is the last book that I read in September. We have The Chase by Elle Kennedy. This is the first book in the Briar U series. That one, but I rated it a 4.25. And that was all the books that I read in September. Okay, on to October. I read 7 books in October. This is the most amount of books I read in a month this entire year, which was very huge for me. I did not expect to read that many books, but I'm very glad that I was able to do that. So first up, we have Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams. This is the second book that comes after When in Rome. I rated this a 4.5. Next up, I have a book that I read on my Kindle, Keep Your Friends Close by Lucinda Berry. This one I rated a 3.5. Moving on, we have The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This one I rated a 4. Next up, I have Killjoy. This is part of the Good Girls Guide to Murder series. This is a novella that I guess I was supposed to read before the Good Girls Guide to Murder. Like, I rated it a 4. It was next up, What Happens After Midnight by K.L. Walther. This one I rated a 4.5. Next up, we have The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is the first book in the Natural series. This one, I rated a 4.5. And the last book that I read in October was Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover. Gave this a 5. On to November. I read 3 books in November. The first one was Twisted Games. This is the second book in the Twisted series by Ana Huang. I rated this one a 4. Next up, we have Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. This is the second book after It Happened One Summer. I think I rated it the exact same as the first one, a 4.25. Next up, we have Mr. Fixer-Upper by Lucy Score. Gave it a 4.5 stars. And lastly, on to December. So for December, I read 2 regular books and 5 little short ebooks. So the first book that I read in December was The Christmas Fix by Lucy Score. This is the book that comes after Mr. Fixer-Upper, which I talked about earlier in this video. This book I graded a 5. Then I started I just looked it up. What is it called? The Under the Mistletoe collection, which was 5 little like short ebooks that were strictly on the Kindle. I'll put them one at a time here on the screen. So the first one is Cruel Winter with You. This one was by Ali Hazelwood. This one I rated a 3.5. Next up, we have Merry Ever After by Tessa Bailey. This one was one of my favorites out of the 5. I rated this one a 4. Next up, we have Merriment and Mayhem. I don't know how to say her last name, but it's Alexandria something. Bellefleur, something like that. This one I also rated a 4. This was also one of my favorites of... Oh, I skipped one. I'll finish with this one, but I read one before this. I skipped over. Let me go back to the one that I skipped. This was All by My Elf by Olivia Dade. This one was my least favorite. I rated it a 2. And then the last one of those 5 is Only Santa's in the Building by Alexis Daria. This one was... okay, this one I rated a 3.75. Last book that I read in December, which I literally just finished today. Today is New Year's Eve, so Happy New Year's. It is, again, I read this one on the Kindle. How My Neighbor Stole Christmas by Megan Quinn. Can we take a moment for this book? I love this book so much. Obviously, I rated it a 5-star. So that is the last book that I read in December, the last book that I read for the year. So that's it. That's all of them. And that's a wrap on 2024 in reading. So really quickly before I actually end this video, I kind of wanted to go over a few things from my reading journal and like my year in books from Goodreads. So overall, I read 58 books. You know what? Let's just start with the stats. So my 2024 year in books, according to Goodreads, there's going to be a glow on my face. I apologize for that. Let me just turn this down maybe a tad so it's not so bright. Okay. My year in books. So I read 58 books. That was 18,037 pages. My shortest book was one of the little ebooks, not from the Christmas one, but from the first one, The Improbable Meet Cute. It was Drop, Cover, and Hold On. That was only 40 pages. My longest book, however, was Binding 13 at 610 pages. My average book length in 2024 was 310 pages. My most shelved book was It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. That was 6,363,042. I'm assuming, I'm not even sure exactly what that means. I'm assuming it means like that is the book that the most people have on their, one of their like lists on Goodreads. And then my least shelved book was French Kissing in New York. That one was 4,759. My average rating for 2024 was a 4.1. The highest rated book that I read on Goodreads was Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh. And then it kind of just shows all the books that I read. So I thought that was kind of fun and interesting to share with you. And then a few things here from my reading journal. This was my 24 books in 2024 spread. Out of the 24, I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Did I? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 11. So not even halfway. I didn't even read half of them. Close. I read close to half, but not quite half. And then let's see here. My favorite books of the month spread. These were all my favorites of each month. So definitely, I wouldn't say that these were like my top of the top. I mean, mostly. A lot of these I really, really enjoyed. Like, if I had to pick like a few off of this one that I like absolutely am in love with and would highly, highly recommend, I would say Good Girl's Guide to Murder, Summer of Broken Rules, Reminders of Him, How My Neighbor Stole Christmas. Those ones are like high on my list. Things We Never Got Over was great. Mr. Fixer-Upper. I mean, these were all like fantastic reads, obviously, because they were my favorite, but I think that's all I'm going to share with you from that. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's kind of a long one. I am excited to see how my reading goes in 2025. And yeah, thank you guys for following along. I hope you guys have a fantastic 2025 of reading, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a magical day. Bye, guys.